it can be really lonely being in a place where you almost feel like you're right on the cusp of a life change. And sometimes you don't even know what that change is, what it's going to look like. You just know something needs to be different. And I want to make moves to change my situation. It could be, something like my case where you want to go to a different place. It could be moving into, maybe developing a different, it could be developing a different side of your personality or a different aspect of your personality. It could be, you being in a place where you want to be more ambitious, with your job. Maybe you want to start a company, you want to be an entrepreneur, whatever it is. It can just be really, really lonely because it happens a lot where you reach this point mentally and it's not really any fault of the people around you, but they're not in your head. They're doing their own thing, they're on their own journey, and they're not willing, able, or even understand where you're at or where you're going in order to meet you where you are, where you want to be. And I found myself at that place maybe a few years ago where I looked around, like I was around a bunch of people hanging out, and it was just like, this isn't where I want to be. This isn't what I want to be doing. And now that I've kind of gotten to the other side of this big change, I have a much better understanding of one, how to make that transition from, maybe an old community that you've built, an old group of friends, whatever, and how to build a community in a new place, in a new season of life, in a new chapter, whatever. And so that's what I kind of want to talk about because it's hard. It's hard. I feel like there's so many of us who are in this place. And obviously, just as humans, we grow, we develop, we change at different rates, even with people that you may have grown up with, even with people that have known you for a long time, that you've known for a long time. It can just be a real challenge, especially when you know that the people that you're around might not be the best for you in terms of helping you to get to the next place, or they might be uncomfortable with the changes that they're seeing in you. Yeah, so that's what we're going to talk about today. I think the first thing that tripped me up was that I didn't take the time initially to really take stock of what was going on. Like, I felt the discomfort. I was so uncomfortable and I couldn't really understand why, but I didn't like stop for a minute and give it some real thought. Like, why don't these get-togethers feel comfortable anymore? Why don't these parties seem as fun anymore? And I think if I had done that a lot earlier, one, I would have been a whole lot more satisfied, a whole lot less dissatisfied with the way my friendships were going. Um, and I also wouldn't have, I don't want to say clung on to them, but I don't think it would have bothered me so much when those relationships started to change because I kind of knew I would have known what was happening in terms of myself. And I just want to make it clear, like, I'm not judging any of my old friends. I really just think it was one of those things where we were in different places. Um, but I do specifically remember a particular time where, I'm like, hey guys, why don't we do more of this? I feel like, this is cool what we're doing, but I feel like we could be doing so much more. Like we could be doing this, this, and this. And it would be so cool if we all got together and, we made this bigger thing. And, I want to do more in terms of my ministry and helping people. And I also want, to be doing more of this type of adventuring and different hobbies. And the room was just like crickets. And I remember when I got home, I just remember feeling like kind of heavy. I think heavy is probably the right word because it can be so hard feeling like you're really excited about something and you want more for someone else and they just don't. They're just like, we're good where we are. And for them they were. So, hey. I also think giving some more deliberate thought to whether it was just like I needed to expand my friend group or whether I needed a complete overhaul. Now, either might be valid for you. I think I tend to lean toward expansion over overhauling because if possible, I prefer not to burn a bridge. Now, don't get me wrong, there are certain people burn the bridge, but I do tend to prioritize maintaining some level of connection, um, and not like leaving a bad taste in people's mouths. And I also think there's a way to overhaul your friendships without it being like explosive and dramatic and all that. But anywho, um, yeah. Also, I didn't put this in my notes, but also there is, I think for me, it took a really long time for me to realize that just because something had been around for a while, just because something was maybe easily accessible, just because something made sense logistically or timing wise, doesn't necessarily mean that it's something you have to accept, you know? And that could be with your friendships, it could be with a romantic relationship, whatever. I wish in more times in my life I would have realized, so, just because it's convenient to be friends with this person for one reason or another, it doesn't it doesn't have to be a thing. You don't have to be super close to this person just because it's easy. So anyhow, and the difficulty is that once you get to that point where you realize, okay, a change needs to be made. Once you get to adulthood, I touched on this in my video a couple days back, which is like society is designed to make us lonely. It's like so many of the structures that we have, which would normally be conducive for making friends, just aren't really there in the same way as you get older. So you think like I know people who, when they went to college, like it was a lot easier to maintain friends because you're going to the same classes every week, or at least one or two classes every week together. Maybe you have extracurriculars. When you're in high school, you're together multiple times a day. Maybe you take the bus together. Maybe you're walking to school together. Maybe you're driving to school together. Whatever. It's the ease of like almost having built-in repetition. And these days, like, yeah, we have work, but I feel like fewer and fewer people are like friends with their coworkers for a variety of reasons. um and again, I don't think that's like a good or bad thing necessarily, because these days you do anything outside of work and people have things to say and it can cost you dearly. So I understand not being friends with people at work, but repetition is and I'll talk about it more later, but repetition, like seeing someone regularly is what like feeds friendship oftentimes. But anywho, like I said, I'll talk about that more in the next section. The other thing is that at this age, many of us already have our like default friend group kind of locked in, you know? Like at 30 years old, most of my friends already have their best friend, and they've usually been friends with that person for several years. Most of my friends already have their go-to people for when they want to go partying, their go-to people for when they want to go on like cute little museum outing, their go-to friends for traveling. And if you're kind of not intentionally a lone wolf, but you're just at that point where you're trying to do something a bit different, um, maybe you are overhauling your friendship, maybe you're trying to expand. But either way, if you're not solidly in an established group, um, it can be difficult. It can be really difficult. I even think it's funny sometimes when I talk to my friends and I invite a new friend or a new set of friends somewhere, and they're like, new people. And I get it. I get it. I just think it's funny. Um that reaction is still like a thing. But now I think they know that if I'm bringing someone around, generally speaking, they've been vetted to a degree. Um, yeah, I don't know. And then also, there's something about not blind vulnerability, but again, if people already have their friendships that they've had for years and they've already gotten to a point of like some level of vulnerability with those friends, generally, I mean, I do feel like it's a little different with men. Men will play one game of basketball and be best friends with somebody, but but there's a level of vulnerability that's required for like a beyond the surface friendship. And when you're an adult, where we all have baggage, all of us, every single one of us has had a negative experience with a friend. Maybe you were the trifling friend. Don't lie. Think about it. Um, we all had a negative experience with a friend. Like just the thought of having to open yourself up to any level of vulnerability with someone that like you don't have the history with. Ugh, ugh, yuck, ew. It's just, it is not ideal. Oh gosh. And then even further, when you are in this period of transition, trying to make friends in the middle of a transition is like, oh, it it just adds another level of complexity because of course all of us are constantly changing in one way or another, right? But all right, my notes is being weird. Okay. All of us are constantly changing. But when you're in the middle of a big internal change specifically, and you're still like who you are, but you're still trying to figure out what this next version of yourself looks like, what the next iteration is going to be, what you're prioritizing, and those pieces are kind of moving, it can be difficult to grasp onto different people and also for them to grasp onto you because people can kind of also tell when you're a little all over the place, maybe still trying to figure things out. I think a lot of people don't have a ton of grace these days. And even if nothing's wrong, it's not as established as what some people might want, you know? Oh, so there's that. But now let's switch over to the solution, right? How do you actually find your people when you're in this place where you're like, I've outgrown my community, I've outgrown my friends. And maybe it's not outgrowing, you're just growing in different directions. That's perfectly plausible. There's a lot of times when that happens, and it doesn't mean, like I said, it's not necessarily outgrowing, you're just growing in different ways. Maybe one person is growing emotionally while this person is growing career wise. Maybe this person is growing in terms of starting a family and going a different direction, while this person is growing in terms of being more adventurous and putting themselves out there more. It'd be like that. It's the difficulty of maintaining human relationships. But I think first and foremost, it's important to think deeply about the changes that you're making and what you feel is most important in this next group of friends, this next, um, I don't want to say cohort, but the next set of people that you incorporate into your life. What what does that look like? Are you prioritizing someone who matches you in terms of ambition? Do you want someone who is a creative? Do you want to prioritize people who are really loyal and maybe very stable presences, presenti? Um, I'm sorry, it's late, y'all. I'm delirious. Uh, yeah, like, someone who's very stable, maybe someone who feels like they have their lives together a little bit more. Um, just because it feels more grounding. Like I don't know. Are you looking for a travel buddy? Are you looking for someone who understands your desire to be an entrepreneur, or they understand your desire to solo travel, or I don't know. I think it's important to really focus on what you're looking for. That way, when you see it, it's easier for you to one find them, and we'll get to that in the next point, but or like look for them, but also you can kind of prioritize fostering that relationship, nurturing that relationship with those types of people. It's actually very similar to like my job search strategy, but that's a topic for another day. um and so, like I mentioned earlier, building in a level of repetition, I feel like is one of the most important, but also kind of difficult parts because we're missing so many third spaces. So I think scientifically, one of the ways that we as humans start building friendships with people who are outside of our family, it's people who we see regularly, right? So if you were an 80s or 90s kid and you remember, playing outside with your neighbors, it was because your neighbor lived next door, they lived down the street, and it was real easy for you to knock on their door and go play with them, right? Or for you to see them playing in their front yard and then y'all are playing together. It's really easy to make friends in kindergarten and middle school and high school, easier, I'll say, because you're seeing someone every day. And in the course of you seeing someone every day, there's some commonalities. We have the same history teacher, we have the same lunch period, we have similar extracurriculars, um, we have the same recess time. Like, it's the repetition. And as an adult, that gets difficult because, again, lack of third spaces. So trying to build in repetition might look like um, going to a regular workout class, maybe a volunteer commitment. For me, it's largely ministry activities. A lot of my friends, that's how I met them. Because we're both kind of doing the same thing. And if that's important for me and my friends, if I'm doing the thing regularly and I see these other people doing the same thing regularly, it's a lot easier for us to click, even if you're not best friends with everyone. It could be renting out the same co-working space once a week. It could be, I don't know. Um, you're less likely to make friends with people that you keep in touch with at one-off events. Although, I will say, that sometimes one-off events, if you're somebody that's real good at networking and moving and grooving at these different events, bouncing around between groups, introducing yourself without it being like awkward and that sort of thing, um, which by the way, even if that's not you, it might be a good way to build that skill to put yourself out there, even though it's scary, even though it's uncomfortable. Um, yeah, you can still do that. Just saying, it's a great way to practice. Uh, yeah, and then once you start seeing those people regularly, sparking up a conversation, uh, I find short, quick little interactions are great in the beginning. It doesn't have to be a whole conversation. Girl, you killed the class today. Wish I had your stamina. Um, I see you in here regularly. What type of work do you do? What's your job title? What company do you work for? Do you like them? Um, whatever. How long have you been remote working? Um, are there any other co-working spaces that you generally go to? I'm trying to find a new spot in the area. I don't know. Start regular conversations with people. Um, I also feel like while you do have to be cautious, there are more and more online communities popping up, especially if you have really niche interests. Online might be it. Like trying to think of a random hobby. Uh, if you're somebody that's into like crocheting or knitting or something, the way it is so easy to find. I'm sorry. I think half of my thoughts are in memes, but the way it's so easy to find someone who like posts on TikTok all their little knitting projects, and there are other people like, oh, I just started this project, and da, 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 da. So many people starting like Discord and Slack communities. Um, yeah, if you, especially if you have really niche interests, online, kind of a cool place to go. Yeah, and then I know several people who started posting online and found like their friends, even if it's not all of their friends, just like a couple of their friends who had same like similar interests, because they were posting how much they like their niche interest. Like, if you really like hosting events and you start talking about how you plan out your events and how you like to pick the decorations and how you do this affordably and how you choose a spot and da da da, there will be people who are on the same energy as you are that will inevitably find you and reach out. You might be in a similar space to you. So that's another good way. I don't know. Yeah, being out there, posting content, also cool. Also cool. And then once you do start meeting people, getting kind of, it sounds crazy, like friend referrals. It sounds crazy, but hear me out. Even with my friend groups, right? If I told them, hey, I'm new to this area and I really want to expand like my friend group, I'm trying to meet more people while I'm here. They were like, okay, cool. And they started inviting me different places so I can meet people. Thank you. Love that for me. It's great. Um, yeah, those like friend of a friend referrals, or maybe not referrals. I don't know. But I mean, sometimes there's a direct referral. Like, oh my gosh, I know somebody else that does XYZ. You should get connected with them. And, I don't know. And then once you start kind of picking up those individual connections, what do you do to deepen them? And what I will say is almost like in romantic relationships, you hear people who will be like, yeah, we just met and we clicked and we talked every single day since the day we, most relationships don't start that way. It's real cute. It's real cute. It looks great on Instagram. It sounds good on, a cute little TikTok story. The majority of relationships don't start that way. And it's the same with friendships. Most of my close friends, well, My closest friends over the years, a lot of them, we used to laugh about how we did not like each other. Either we didn't like each other or we weren't really sure about each other when we first met. And then once we got to know each other, it was cool. Even my I don't want to say my most recent friend, but um someone that I met recently, relatively recently. Yeah, it was like years of us kind of being reminded of each other before we finally got together, and then it was like, oh, okay, we do kind of click. So I always think that's funny. Um, yeah, but it. I think the difficulty is that getting close to someone generally requires a level of vulnerability. And these days, when everyone is allergic to commitment, everyone's allergic to caring more about somebody than what the other person cares about them. And like that fear of being seen, putting in effort, being seen trying, being seen caring about something is, it can be really scary to be the first person to like really put in effort, to really be like, hey, I want to get to know you. Let's hang out. Because rejection is hard. And again, these days, I don't know what it is. Y'all don't know how to deal with rejection. I say to myself, it sucks. It's hard. So you might have to be the person who follows up, who texts first. Now, I'm not encouraging one-sided relationships, of course, but you might have to be the person that puts in the effort initially, because all of us are scared of rejection. All of us are scared of being the one to put in effort. And unfortunately, for some of us, in order to get the friendships that we want, we have to be the one to be a little vulnerable in the beginning. And that's scary and it sucks. Whew. Um, I forget that I write some of this stuff down. So I'll be looking at my notes, I'll be like, ah. Okay. So moving past surface level, maybe a little bit faster than what feels socially acceptable. And what do I mean by that? I mean, like, oftentimes, for instance, on social media, we're looking for relatable content. We're looking for the person that maybe overshares a little bit. We're looking for the person that talks openly about their life and their dreams and their failures and whatnot. And again, I'm not encouraging you to put all your cards on the table immediately. But what I have found is that, one, allowing yourself to be vulnerable is kind of a skill that you have to develop. But two, people like surprisingly often respond overwhelmingly positive to that. And what I will say is sometimes balancing to like, did I overshare? Or am I just kind of being an open and honest person? It can be a bit of a balance. But again, you being willing to take that first step of vulnerability makes it so much easier for someone else to take a step toward you, because now it's almost like the weight is off their shoulders, you know? And then, of course, after that, it's not like you have to keep being the person that's giving and 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 giving. But it's a good place to start, and then you can see if that person gives you anything back. And then I I think that generally consistency beats intensity, in that, like, okay, it's cool that, what is this one lock doing? It's still poking out. What are we doing? Anyway, um, it's easier to make a friend if you talk to each other once a week, once every couple weeks for maybe a couple months, rather than like, hey, let's spend the whole day together, and then you don't talk for like a month. You know what I mean? Like, it's easier to do quick little check-ins. Send them a little TikTok, send them an article based on like a conversation that you had. Maybe set up another hang for like a couple weeks out or over the weekend or something like that. Rather than, we're gonna spend all this time together. That is a little intense. It's a little scary. Does it work sometimes? Sure, but like the other person has to be really on board. And I don't know. It can be a lot. So yeah, I think those are generally my tips for building community when you're kind of in this transition period. Even if you're not 100% sure what the next version looks like of yourself, of your life, whatever, I think you can usually feel when something just doesn't feel perfectly aligned. It doesn't feel right for where you are in your life. And yeah, sometimes for the health of your friendships, it might be good to back away and maybe, branch out into other areas. And yeah, it's needed at different times in our life, I'll say. There are very few times when someone is like with you through every stage of your life, through every, I don't say personality change. It's not like we got huge mood swings, but people just change over time, you know? Our needs and wants change, the chapters of our lives change, life circumstances change. And so I think it's a good skill to build, to learn how to make friends. Even in times like this when it's really, really hard to make genuine connections with people. So yeah. Um just to, I guess, wrap it up. I think it's normal to feel a level of loneliness in times like this. Lord knows I felt real lonely during that like year of time between when I decided that, like, yes, I'm going to move, something needs to change, like my friends, my location, my job, everything needs to change, and when that change actually happened. um and it's not necessarily a sign that like something is wrong. Sometimes you're just in process. Sometimes you're at the point of progress where you're a little bit of an island, and you keep going and you find your people. You keep going, you get to a place that feels a little more comfortable, a little more aligned, so on and so forth. Um yeah. So I guess give it some thought. Who right now really feels like, yeah, this is good for my next chapter of life? And who in your life feels like, eh, maybe I just need to let this fade? And for those people that you want to go into this next chapter of your life, maybe try to go a little deeper with them. Talk about something different. Ask them a question about a part of their life that you never talked about before. I don't know. I don't know. Get a little bold, to be a little audacious, respectful, but audacious. So thanks, y'all. Thanks for listening to me yap for 30 minutes. If you don't know, my name is Alexis, and I post every day here on YouTube about all things life changes and career changes and travel and anything else that's on my mind. So feel free to hop on this train early. My first goal is coming up quickly at 100 days, but my overall goal is a full 365 of daily posting here on YouTube. So hopefully this was interesting to you. Feel free to subscribe and join us here on this journey of yapification and trying to navigate all the different changes of adulthood. Oh yeah. Thanks, y'all. Have a good night. Bye.